Good morning, and thanks for joining us for Face the State on this Sunday morning. I'm Dennis House. The Republican field for governor is not quite set. There are a couple of candidates who are petitioning to make the ballot and 3 who are already there. And with us today is one of the candidates who is trying to make the ballot, David Stemerman. He is a former hedge fund manager from southwestern Connecticut. Mr. Stemerman, good to see you back here in the program.
Great to be with you, Dennis.
So walk us through this process you're going through, because you're not on the ballot and you want to get on the ballot and you have to get all these signatures. So how does it work? What's your daily work schedule like?
Well, I can tell you, I wouldn't have closed my business that I started 10 years ago. I wouldn't be putting my family through this with 5 children unless I expected to be on the ballot. And we knew from the time last year when we decided to do this that the people of Connecticut are looking for change. They're looking for a political outsider with business background. We didn't think that the convention was going to be the way that we were going to do it. All the people that made it through on the Republican side have been running for office for a long time, in some cases for more than a decade. So we've been planning since February. We hired what we think are the best group of people to help us in the country on it. We laid out a plan months ago. We're right on track. We're going to be on the ballot.
How many signatures do you have so far? You need, what, 9,500, is that correct?
We need 2% of registered Republicans, which is a little over 9,000, and we are well on our way. So we had a plan that we laid out weeks ago, months ago. We've been tracking it every single day. We're very excited about where we are, very confident of being on the ballot.
You recently got some good press through the Hartford Courant. They said that you were one of the few candidates who actually had a plan in an editorial. They talked about this, and you talked about it a little bit last time you were on in terms of that plan. But before we get to that, you need to get past those other 3 candidates who are on the ballot already, Sitnick, Boughton, and Herbst. What makes you a better choice for Republicans in terms of the governor's race than them?
So I appreciate your raising that from the Hartford Courant. They didn't say we were one of the, they said we were the only candidate that had a plan. When I was on with you first a few weeks ago, we said we're going to bring a big game of ideas. Since we've been on together, we have showed people a plan of what we can do to save our state from a financial crisis, but most importantly, how we're going to grow. And I think that as I've traveled around the state, people have said the same thing again and again and again, which is that they love to stay in our state, but the taxes are too high and there are no jobs here. And so we think it's very important for the people here to have an optimistic plan of what we're going to do about it. We laid out a plan just a few weeks ago specifically on tax cuts. So we're going to take our tax code from 7 taxes and we're going to simplify it to only 3. The lowest tax bracket is going to be 0 for the first 10,000. If you're a middle income person in the 5 to 5.5%, we're going to cut it to 4. And at the top end, it's only going to be 5%. We're going to eliminate the death tax. We're going to eliminate what's something called the business entity tax, which means as soon as you go into business, they slap you with a tax. It's crazy stuff, and we're going to reduce taxes on employers. It's that kind of thinking. We give you details of how much it costs, where we're going to cut the spending, so it's a credible plan. So
you're talking about a reduction in the state income tax. 2 of your opponents, Bob Stefanowski and Mark Boughton, want to get rid of it altogether over 10 years. Is that feasible?
I don't think so. We talked to a guy in Old Tradebrook who saw one of the ads, and he said, I don't believe it for a second. And so what I think is important is not only to have a plan, but for it to be a credible plan. What we've seen from Dan Malloy and for those who have run our state for decades is broken promises. The opponents talk about eliminating the income tax as big ideas. Those aren't big ideas, they're empty promises. And it's your job and the job of everyone else here to make sure that you hold them accountable. You say, where is that money going to come from? That's half of the revenues for our states. Does it mean we're going to cut spending by 50%? It's a crazy idea. It's the same kind of false promises that's gotten our state into the trouble it is today.
When you meet someone who says, you know, I think I'm going to support Boughton or I'm going to support Herbst, what do you tell them? Why would they go for David Stemerman instead? What's the argument?
Well, in that case, I think it's pretty straightforward. So one of the reasons that we were very excited about getting into this race is that a political outsider with business experience is what the people of this state are looking for. They know that we are on the wrong track. When I go around the state, just over the Memorial Day weekend, I was from the west in Byram and Reading to the east in Mystic and Norwich, and they say the same thing again and again and again. I ask them, how's our state doing? They either say, not so good, or they laugh. And they laugh, they say, you know the state's doing terribly. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And we need somebody with business background who can understand what were our former strengths, has outside-the-box thinking, creative ideas. We talk about not only cutting taxes, we talk about attracting billions of dollars of private investment to rebuild our trains, roads, and airports, make our schools better. Those are the kind of ideas that are going to let us to have more jobs, lower taxes.
Many of the economic experts, when they talk about Connecticut's situation, always point to the pension problem in our state.
Yes.
And you have been quoted as saying something along the lines of some of these people who were promised benefits years ago may not get them now that they are retiring in terms of the state pensions. Is that correct? And what, and what is the reality of that in terms of how drastic will these cuts be?
So Dennis, this is really a sad situation for our state. And these are promises that politicians have made for decades with money they didn't have, promises that can't be kept. And as I go all around the state, I talk to a retiree in Hamden. I talk to somebody who's in Orange, who's been working for the state for 20 years. He said, I haven't invested a single cent in my retirement, and I need to be here for 40 years to do it. Should I stay? Am I going to get anything? And what I said is, with the current path we're on, you're not. I started my business, an investment business, from a single desk in 2008. It was the start of the financial crisis. What I see in our state now reminds me of exactly that. The plan that we put out on our website, davidstemerman.com, the first plan was addressing this. We talk about it in three ways. The first thing is saving our state employees and retirees retirement, making sure there's something there for them at the end of the day, but also saving our taxpayers. The retirement benefits that we've been promising to our state employees are not what anybody in the private sector can earn. And the last thing is, I gave that speech introducing it at Tracy Elementary School in Norwalk, because we're not providing the resources we need to educate our children. So it's all coming together to figure this thing out.
You had talked about some of the things you wanted to privatize last time.
Yes.
The rail is one of them.
Yes.
Perhaps an airport.
Yes.
How would that work exactly?
So we're going to come out with another big plan next week. Give you a little teaser on this, and hopefully we can come back and talk with you about it further. Is all over the world, what I've seen in my business is airports, roads, trains in Asia, in Europe, they're run by private businesses. They invest billions of dollars of capital. They're the ones who have the engineering expertise that can deliver these big projects on time and on budget. For the trains, we're going to tell you about getting the train from New York City to Stanford in 30 minutes, Bridgeport in 45, New Haven in 60. These are going to be game changers. For the highways, we're going to be able to add new lanes to our existing highways. And for airports, yeah, Southern Connecticut is the largest population center in the country without regular passenger airport service. That's Sikorsky Airport or Tweed. That should be a great location to do that. But it's going to require outside-the-box thinking. The guys who have been career politicians, they haven't seen this, they don't know how to do it. It requires an entrepreneur, somebody who's going to be able to cut a deal, bring in capital, and is going to make this happen.
The city of Hartford is the face of the state in many ways, as you know,
Yes.
and it's the home of companies, and the state government recently got a bailout from the state.
Yeah.
But the future isn't exactly rosy necessarily, because there could be other financial problems down the road.
Yeah.
What is your vision for Hartford, and how should it be managed financially by the state?
So the first thing that I think is important for all of our states is that we need to have standards and accountability. In my business every day, we were either losing money or we were making money. And if we were losing money, we'd go out of business. And for our states, we've handed out money from the central government without any standards for how they need to behave. And as a result, we have now bailed out the city of Hartford. And so we need to create a different kind of environment. People around this state, they work hard for the money that they earn, and they want to make sure that it is managed responsibly. It's their tax dollars. So in terms of how we fix this for Hartford and the other cities, the first thing is having standards and accountability before we send money there. The second thing, though, is how do we create growth and opportunity? And so Hartford is yet another example of what infrastructure projects we can do. So Bradley Airport used to be Bradley Air Force Base, and it has one of the longest runways in the country. It's right at the intersection between 91 and 84. It's the perfect site for a major logistics hub. In addition, there's tremendous opportunity for advanced manufacturing. So Pratt & Whitney is here. They have the most advanced commercial jet engine on the planet, but they can't get enough people to work here. So when they've announced all the jobs that they're going to increase around the country, they're putting only a small portion of it here in Connecticut. How do we make sure that the jobs are here? Well, I was just with a private sector training company that can train people for those manufacturing jobs. They do it at half the cost of community colleges. And here's the idea of what's so crazy, what's going on here in Hartford. What they said is, between the amount that we get from Pell Grants, we only need a couple $1,000s more per student. We're so confident that those students are going to get jobs, you don't have to pay us anything. We'll just want a portion of the tax receipts that you'd be getting to the government on the back end. And the government said no.
David Stemerman, Republican candidate for governor. Thanks for being on the program today. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Dennis, thanks so much.
When we come back, we'll get some insight into this petitioning process, exactly how it works and who's going to make it and who might not.